Hi, good morning, and welcome to Youth Budget Talks. I am Senator Dr. Marlene Attzs, and it is my immense pleasure this morning to serve as a moderator for this session. I think of myself as youth adjacent, so I was quite happy when I was asked to come and moderate this session with some outstanding members of our youth population of Trinidad and Tobago. And I just wanted to share some insight. What we're going to be doing today is looking a little bit back at budget for 2025 and looking forward to budget 2026 to see what are those areas that our youth representatives think are important for their contemporaries in Trinidad and Tobago, because the future belongs to them. So I am really very pleased to be joined by this panel of 5 outstanding youth persons. So I'd like to introduce them to you. To my immediate right, Nicholai Rampersad, and I just want to share a little bit of Nicholai's biography. Nicholai is a dedicated servant leader and national youth advocate from Trinidad and Tobago. His work is rooted in service, community leadership, and national youth development. At the national level, Nicholai is well-known. He's a well-known youth voice. He currently serves as the chairman of the CLICO Credit Union Youth Arm and as a director at Youth Inspiration Trinidad and Tobago and Caribbean Youth Environment Network. He is deeply committed to youth advocacy and national development, and he completed 2 years of legal studies before transitioning to pursue a BSc in business management. He now combines his understanding of legal frameworks with business insight and modern communication strategies to strengthen his advocacy efforts and drive meaningful, measurable change for the young people across Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome, Nicholai.
Thank you.
To my immediate left, it is my pleasure to introduce our sister, my youthful sister from the sister Isle of Tobago, Jhada Charles. Jhada is passionate. She's a passionate advocate for youth representation and civic engagement. She's a second-year student at the Hugh Wooding Law School, and she holds a bachelor's degree in law. She's committed to advocacy, and that has earned her national and regional recognition. She was named top debater at the 20th National Youth Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and had the distinguished honor of representing our country at the 17th Youth Parliament of the Caribbean and the Atlantic region of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Welcome, Jhada. And then to Nicholas's right, I have Soleil-Marie Collins, Soleil for short. Welcome, Soleil. Soleil is an active member of the Youth Parliamentary Network, having participated in the inaugural Women Parliamentarians of Trinidad and Tobago program. She was part of cohort 1. She's deeply committed to advocacy, leadership, and community empowerment, with a particular focus on justice and social equity. We're going to talk more about that a little later. Soleil holds a certificate in criminology from the UWI Global Campus and a diploma in paralegal studies from the Oxford Graduate College. She's currently pursuing her Bachelor of Laws at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. She also serves as president of the non-governmental organization Sexual Assault Survivors Stand, where she champions the rights and voices of survivors, and she's also secretary of the non-profit organization All-Inclusive Trinidad and Tobago, which promotes youth engagement with a focus on mental health and anti-bullying. Then, to Jhada's left, I have the pleasure to introduce Darion Cupid. Darion has a professional background in customer service across various capacities, and he's currently pursuing further studies in the physical and technical sciences. He has a long-standing passion for civic issues, international politics, mentorship, and youth advocacy. He's a proud alumnus of the 14th National Youth Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago in 2016, and Darion also represented Trinidad and Tobago on the international stage at the 55th General Assembly of the Organization of American States, the OAS, where he contributed to discussions on regional development and youth engagement. Welcome, Darion. And last, but by no means least, pulling up the rear, I welcome Kriss Hosein. Kriss holds a bachelor's degree in process engineering and a technician's diploma in chemical engineering, both from the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Kriss is dedicated to youth leadership and advocacy, and all of this is reflected in his representation of Trinidad and Tobago at multiple national and regional youth parliaments, proudly serving as a Youth Parliament alumnus 2018, 2019, and 2021. Kriss served as moderator for the Parliament's second installment of the Youth Budget Talks, a reflection of his commitment to active youth participation in governance. Welcome again to my 5 panelists. Welcome to all of you. So, we're a few days away from Budget 2026, but we were a few months away, almost a year away from Budget 2025. So, I want to begin the conversation by asking very simply, why you think youth should be involved in national budget conversations? Let me start with Darion. Why you think youth really should be involved in this conversation?
You should be involved in these conversations because youth are the future, well, the now actually. Youth need to feel important, they need to feel like the budget, these discussions are something that have an active interest in their future and they need to be involved in that process.
I totally agree with you. Kriss, what are your thoughts?
Well, when we speak about national development, right, we're speaking about wanting to really establish and upskill young people to be law-abiding citizens and contribute to that thing called national development. And so it starts from as early as in the classrooms or even before. And so engaging us at a point where we can formulate somewhat of an opinion, I think is definitely important when it comes to what the future can look like, given that we would be the drivers there.
I like the point you made about contributing. So I want to ask Soleil, do you think that there is sufficient clarity and transparency around the budget, or is it kind of like a big secret, so that, which is one of the reasons that we find not many youth are getting involved in these conversations?
I won't say it's secret because they do release the statement, but for youths who aren't really versed in how to read it, they may not understand it. So sometimes you may see like the infographics summarizing, but sometimes that isn't sufficient enough. So if we have things to put in place to actually explain to the young people so they could get some kind of interest, because, I mean, it's the national budget, it affects the nation, and your youth, they are the future of this nation. They should be able to understand what is being imposed on us.
And of course, I want to ask Jhada from the Tobago perspective. How is the budget received in Tobago, not as a political tool? How is the budget received by youth? Do you think that there is the same kind of disconnect, for want of a better word, the youth in Tobago, as happens with many of the youth in Trinidad and Tobago, save the 5 of you all here with me this morning? Do you think that there is that same kind of disconnect, or in your networks in Tobago, do you think that there is a greater wanting and yearning to be more involved in the process? What is the youth take on the budget from the Tobago perspective?
Young people, we do want to be involved in the process. We do want to know how it will directly affect us, because it always affects us. But I think that a lot of young people also, they're not focused on the budget because they think if they allocate...
All people think.
Yeah, it's kind of boring in a sense, because it's kind of long, and they'd be like, they don't really sit down and listen out to the full budget, but then afterwards you hear people saying, oh, more money should have gone here, or more money should have gone there. So there's a sentiment that the budget does affect us in that way, but the interest beforehand is not really there.
All right, okay, and I'm going to come back to take up on some of those points, but we have the benefit, the privilege of having among us Nicholai, who in his daytime job is actually involved in as part of the process of preparing the budget. So if you can share for us from a layperson's perspective, so that people have a sense of, because everyone looks forward to budget day, D-Day. If you can share with persons who are viewing and who will look at this later on, what really is involved in coming up with this thing called the budget?
Yeah, definitely. So what you have is you have the individual ministries preparing financial reports, the heads of expenditure, what they would have spent, what current expenditure is going on. So basically what you would have is the permanent secretary, who's the accounting officer for the ministry and the person who signs off on all the financial transactions of that particular ministry, getting together with the director of finance and accounts of that particular ministry and calculating all the monies that would have been spent through the current fiscal and what are the expected expenditure for the upcoming fiscal. When that report is completed, it is then sent off to the Ministry of Finance, who would compile all the figures from the respective ministries and different heads of expenditure to prepare the national budget. I think that's the most simple explanation we can get it to.
So all of this work goes on behind the scenes leading up to what will now be October 13th in 2025, where the budget for 2026 will be read, and all of which would have led up to September the 30th, 2024, which is when the budget for 2025 was read. So there is a lot happening behind the scenes, which I think the population often does not understand. And if I can just add on to what you're saying, that even when the budget is read, that document is then supported by X number of supporting documents in terms of what are the estimates of revenues, estimates of expenditures, the SSIP, the Social Sector Investment Program, the PSIP, all of these things, the Tobago Development Plan. So it's really a massive task.
It is.
And, I think many persons, not youth alone, really don't appreciate all that goes into that particular budget, into that budget process. Yeah. So I want to take us down memory lane a little bit, back to budget 2025, which was read on the 30th of September 2024 by the then Minister of Finance, former Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert. And in that budget, if I can just pull out some of the highlights, one of the things that we saw in that budget, that when it was read, is that we were still heavily dependent on oil and gas. The energy sector was going to be a significant driver for the economy, for the government. But there was an estimated deficit of $5 billion, just over $5 billion. We fast forward to 2026, and the Honorable Minister Tanku, our new Minister of Finance, who's going to make his maiden presentation on Monday, he's saying that has now turned into closer, like 9 to $10 billion. How do you feel about having to incur that kind of deficit? You, all of us, but really the youth, because you will all find yourselves, and I see Soleil has put on her serious face because,
I mean, this is the oil and gas one here, so you really answer.
How do we feel, several things that come out of that. How do we feel about one? So let's start with the first question, continuing to have our economy heavily dependent on oil and gas. I want to start with Jhada a little bit. Coming from Tobago, where Tobago's trajectory really is more tourism-based, how do you feel about having the majority of our national eggs for this budget in the oil and gas sector, as opposed to looking at something else that, might be?
Yeah, I think that the focus should definitely be placed on non-energy sectors such as agriculture and tourism. Tobago needs that investment to boost our tourism so that we can compete with other small islands such as Barbados is heavily tourism-led, and we see how that is doing for their economy, for their foreign exchange, for their local business sectors. So if we get that investment in the budget to boost our tourism, I feel like that would definitely help Tobago P and additionally boost our GDP. But we could see percentages go up if we have an influx of persons. We have a new airport, $400 million went into the development of that airport. So if it is we are able to get bigger flights, the airport is approximated to host around 3 million passengers yearly. So if we can get that airport up and running, we see more tourists coming to the island, coming to the country, and that would be a definite boost outside of the oil and gas sector.
Okay, you also mentioned the agriculture sector. Do you think that there is, and I want to link your mention of the sectors to the youth, particularly in Tobago, do you think that there is interest either in the tourism sector, and I think that there is, but do you think that there is interest in the agriculture sector? Because I don't know if there used to be a saying that Tobago was the breadbasket of Trinidad. Yes. So a lot of the agriculture that Trinidad depended on came from Tobago back in the day. Do you think that youth will be keen to be involved in the tourism sector and in the agriculture sector?
Yes, in the agriculture sector, a lot of young people work because under the Division of Agriculture, they employ a lot of young people to work on the different farms that they have, especially in fisheries as well. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of young people doing the fishing, and that is also going to improve our
agro-processing
enterprise. So I feel like if it's a lucrative business for young people, people want jobs, people want to work, and Tobago has the land and the soil, and we have the produce. If we are able to get more to increase our export, that would be a good business sector for a lot of young people to get involved in.
I'm happy that you said that, and hopefully those who have the power will be listening so that we can translate your idea into something. Kriss, I'm told that you're the energy sector man, so let's come in. What is your take on you know, the elephant in the room. There's a lot of geopolitical issues around the energy sector, but how do you see the energy sector continuing to be sustainable for us in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly when you interject conversations around climate change, global warming, what is happening in North America coming out of the White House, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is your take on where we are and what can be done differently from the youth perspective, something that we can get our youth involved in?
So I think we have done some sort of transitioning within the energy sector. So we have really become more so, I think, within the gas processing industry. So the transition did occur. I'm not going to say that we're solely just in only oil and gas. I mean, the former Minister of Trade, in her presentation, did indicate that we would have seen some growth in the non-manufacturing sector, which would have been feasible. I think that knowing that we have a new administration that is coming in, and that would have changed on April the 28th, it is interesting to see what would be kept and what would be, maybe, I hope, repackaged if we want to. I don't think we should discard things. I just want to tackle something on agriculture quickly. There was a cultural shift that I observed that would have been attempted by the former administration through the Ministry of Youth Development with the agriculture program.
And the farms, yeah.
And the farms.
Yeah. The homestead program, yeah.
Correct. And so young people, I mean, yes, there are some that would have been interested, but to really shift that mindset and put some sort of incentives for that, I think that's a good thing. Now, we know there's no longer that particular line ministry in terms of name, but the outcome in which the program intended to be. I think I would like to see that in this particular budget.
Okay, we're going to come back to see what we want to extract, what we want to take with us on the journey moving forward to Budget 2026 in a little while, but that's one of your placeholders, as it were, in terms of that program.
And in terms of the renewable sector, I know there's a lot of buzzwords and conversation as it's not a light switch. We can't just turn off one sector and then turn on this one and then we're into renewables now. It's going to take a lot of planning, investors. I mean, do we have the capital? How are we going to shift these kind of financial resources, which are limited in its amount right now? And so I think for me, that's a job that we would have elected persons to do. So
Darion,
they must tell us the answer.
Darion, what is your take in terms of, because the conversation has gone in the direction of oil and gas, more so gas, agriculture, tourism. I saw recently, earlier this week, I believe, Jamaica laid in their parliament their entertainment, cultural, and creative industries green paper. So Jamaica is kind of moving swiftly along with this. What do you think the future looks like? Now, I want to preface that by saying, as an economist, I recognize that if you're expecting $40 to $50 billion from the energy sector, nothing is going to replace that in that quantum anytime soon. Right. But how do you think we can get our youth involved so that we can be the change that we wish to see in Trinidad and Tobago, and that in 5-10 years' time, when our youth actually are our policymakers, they are driving the ship in the direction that they think that we need to go? What do you think are the sectors that are going to be important for us moving forward?
Sectors that are going to be important are definitely going to be things like the automation industry. We now have a Ministry of AI.
Yeah.
Formerly, during the pandemic especially, we had a Ministry of Digitization.
That's right.
We need to continue in those aspects. So kind of like what Kriss said, we shouldn't, even with the change in administration, we shouldn't just throw away everything, but AI is also an important facet that we need to employ, especially in fields like agriculture, and just moving away from the more traditional way we do things, just shifting into the 21st century, where in the...
Don't make us sound so archaic now.
I mean,
don't make it sound so now. No, but the future, I think I take your point, and I think really and truly, if we are to engage the youth of Trinidad and Tobago, we have to understand what causes them to get excited.
Correct.
You know, what caused previous generations to get excited may not necessarily be the same thing. So we have to find that skillful blend, so to speak. So you're saying AI, digitization, taking these things forward.
I agree.
You think are important. Soleil, your thoughts?
My thoughts. Well, I'm a proud participant of the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service programs last year, the Caribbean Fellowship Program. And they have put out a lot of programs to help young people. And I think, I know that we have the new line, but they should keep the program so people get involved, because a lot of youth are interested in taking part, but they don't see opportunities to take part in. So if it is that we provide it and give them that opportunity, because once you get that, you get certificates, and with those certificates, you get job opportunities. So once we have it out there for them and advertise it well, we should be able to get somewhere.
So Nicholai, the question is, we have youth, from what our colleagues are saying, we have youth who are interested, but somehow there is a disconnect between what the youth, what they are saying and what they would like to see, and what then gets translated and what then gets manifested at the policy-making level. Help us understand how we can bridge that gap. What needs to be done more? Do we need to have, thanks to the Parliament for hosting us this morning, do we need to have more programs like this on a regular basis where we can actually extract from youth what are their thoughts, what are their policies, what are their plans, what do they think should happen in a particular space, use it as a public education exercise? What do you think really needs to be done to translate some of these ideas into something that is more tangible for Trinidad and Tobago?
So I think there needs to be a harmonization of a lot of the programs. Many times we see similar programs being executed by different ministries. So I think harmonization of those programs is one thing. I also think that there should be a general harmonization of the youth organizations that we have throughout the country. We have many great youth organizations throughout the country, and sometimes what we find happening is that these organizations are sometimes competing with each other and doing bits and pieces in their little spaces. So I think having a National Youth Council that we can say, okay, this is the National Youth Council, and you get persons, the young people, grassroots level, to come and serve on these councils. So you use these councils as a buffer between young people, being the voices of young people, to advise the government of the day. But definitely...
Advise or suggest?
Well, if we are the leaders of now, I say advise.
Okay, all right.
Because if you are telling us as the government that, okay, we want to hear from you, you hear from us, but then it's not translating into policy. It's not translating into the programs that you're proposing. So definitely I would say advise, but definitely harmonization across the board. Ministries understanding, okay, we have the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs now. All right, let this ministry be solely the ministry responsible for youth initiatives, and let the other ministries come into the partnership and say, hey, we want to do this. Can you reach out to the young persons?
All right, so I want to kind of coalesce that idea, because I quite like it. So one question is, that National Youth Council, where will it be domiciled? Where will it reside from an organizational perspective? Because I don't think you want it to be mired in the political arena. I think you want it to be a think tank, so to speak, that could encourage youth to be free to discuss their ideas. So that's the one thing. Where would you locate such a council? But the second thing that I quite like from what you said is essentially a whole of government approach, so that you stop operating in silos. So if the ministry responsible for youth, all things regarding youth, including agriculture, sport initiatives, AI targeted at youth, not that youth are the only people interested in AI, but AI targeted at youth, the creatives targeted at youth, etc., etc. But the first thing is, so if you can start to think about that in terms of how, respective areas of interest, but where would this National Youth Council be domiciled? Where do you think would be the best place to put it so that it can achieve that cross-fertilization of ideas that you mentioned, but it is also sort of not part of the political free?
I think maybe coming into establishing it as a non-profit organization, so to speak, and then having government recognize that, okay, this is the National Youth Council of Trinidad and Tobago, so you partner with the National Youth Council, and that way there are opportunities presented to the council. The council is given a position of priority to say, okay, we need youth representation, so we take from the council, but the council is also given some level of funding at the same time.
I was just about to say non-profit
but some level of funding to be able to execute its mission.
mandate, yes.
Being able to go on the grassroots level, connect with youth, but also being able to implement programs that get youth aware of what's taking place. Because we have to realize that, yes, we're in the 21st century, but not all young people have access to internet, to a laptop, to a tablet. And that's the reality of what we have going on currently. So we have to have persons going there, speaking to these young people. I can speak for where I live currently in Penal. There are some persons, some full families without any electronic devices. And during COVID, that was really tough for them.
I was just about to say that COVID, I think, was the greatest eye-opener that we've had. You know, we just made an assumption that everyone could transition to online. And I had the experience, I mean, because of my full-time, my day job, I deal with these things in a very real way. But I had the experience of going to the supermarket on one occasion during COVID, and there was a merchandiser packing out her stock, and her child was attending class on her phone, and then her boss was calling her on her phone, so the child's class had to be interrupted. And that really brought the point home to me that we've made this assumption that people can just transition.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation between one device as opposed to two devices, as opposed to connectivity, as opposed to whether you put a top up because many people didn't have a postpaid, and it was all of these conversations. So I totally agree with you that we need to meet youth where they are and bring them to where we want to be, because not to sound wax poetic or anything like that, it really should be no youth left behind in Trinidad and Tobago. As we move forward, it really should be a conversation of no youth left behind. But I want to come back to what do you think in terms of this whole of government approach in terms of our youth, where we have a ministry dedicated to young persons, and how do we address things like the gender issues inside of there? Because I know there is something that Soleil, I'm going to tap her brain on in a little while, because they're very specific and it comes back, it's tangential to the point that Nicholai was making. We assume that all of our young women can access resources that they need when they have to deal, for example, with their menstrual cycle. We don't discuss these things in a budget, for example. These are not issues, so you'll find an NGO quietly discussing the issues. How do we, Soleil, talk about issues that may disproportionately impact on our female youth as opposed to our male youth? How do we get these conversations into the budget? And is it important for us to have these conversations in the budget?
I mean, there are always conversations within the youth space, but to actually implement it in the budget would be greatly appreciated, because menstrual products, whether it be liners, tampons, pads, they are quite expensive. And this is something a female has to deal with on a monthly basis. So it's not to say that it's just a by the way we have to purchase. This is a necessity for us in our everyday lives. So that should be taken into account, especially with taxes placed on it. I mean, I personally think you all should remove that.
Collective royal we.
I mean, as the youth, as Mr. Nicholai said, we are advising you all to remove
all of us, all of us.
Yeah, but no, really and truly, NGOs, we would come forward and we would have little donation drives to help persons in need. We will donate to the shelters and whatnot. But in the event you're not part of a shelter and not part of that realm, and you can't afford a pad, and they don't even distribute it in schools, which I think should be a necessity as well.
Okay.
Where do you get these things from?
So here is an opportunity, a very tangible example of an issue impacting female youth, and there may be similar issues, well, not similar, there might be issues impacting specifically affecting our male youth, where a ministry of youth that really sort of coordinates youth initiatives across other ministries could address these in a real issue. So you identified, perhaps having them in school, so there's an opportunity for partnership for the Ministry of Education to identify rural versus urban areas where the rural schools and the rural youth might be more in need of some of these, some of this kind of support. Things like agriculture, how do you get our youth involved in the agriculture process, et cetera, et cetera. So while it may not appear in Minister Tanku's, because Minister Tanku's presentation is going to be at a very high macro level, but certainly as part of the budget debate that ensues after the presentation of the budget, maybe it is something, and maybe our conversation is timely, so maybe someone listening from one of the line ministries might decide they want to include this as part of their budget presentation for fiscal 2026.
Not only Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, because this is our health issues, the Ministry of Utilities, because they provide the sanitary bins in schools and in public places. And
but also access to water. I mean, one of my previous lives, I was quite chagrined to learn about the challenges that females face on their menstrual cycle related to lack of water. You know, when you're getting water once a month or once every 6 weeks, and it's only when I attended a consultation many years ago, it suddenly occurred to me that this thing called water really is life. This is really an important issue, so there is an opportunity for having those kinds of conversations. Kriss, I see you're there, you're excited to say something on the topic.
Well, you see, I don't want to say an issue, but I'm battling something, which is our education ministry or our education journey as young people or whatever, from primary all the way to tertiary, or wherever you decide to end, is it effective enough? Because are we supplementing what the education system intention should have been?
Tell me what you mean by effective. I like what I think the question is, but tell me what you mean. Tell me what you mean by effective.
It's really being able to wield the talents and the skills and improve on those innate abilities that young people have. So whilst we have young persons spending almost 20 years of their life and then recognizing, well, I just need to spend a year or two to do a short program because I need a certificate for it, and I just realized this year, what would we have invested the entire, maybe the last 5 years of your life like? So I think we should look at that whole thing called education reform and how best we can have innovative persons, creative thinkers, rather than persons just being able to take tests. And one more thing I want to mention, the budget, I mean, I know that the conversation here is very much about, it's on the appropriation bill, what we expect to see. One of the things that I am expecting, because this is a new minister.
I want us to stick a pin there, because I will get to that point in terms of what you want to see moving forward. I could not let the conversation around education go. I just, sorry, I couldn't let that conversation pass. And you highlighted some interesting things. Who are we educating for, and what are we educating for? A for apple, B for bat, C for cat, really very good. But A could also be for automotive, B could also be for Barbados, and C could also be for cannabis, which was one of the things that the current government mentioned as part of their diversification strategy. So this conversation around education, Kriss used the term education reform. What are your thoughts, Darion? Has the time come, and we're having a conversation, and this is part of an education that we're dealing with here. You're educating your peers, educating me as well, and those who are viewing. Has the time come for us to introduce conversations around the budget in our education system? Should we be teaching these things?
Without a doubt, yes, because I think, again, what I said earlier about youth involvement, many people just don't see themselves as part of the conversations. It's just seen as something that affects us. Yes, we need money, but beyond that, we just don't get involved. So yes, I think it needs to be involved in the schooling, in the educational programs before Form 6, before there's a youth parliament. Because, okay, we are the, 0.1%, I think you said earlier.
0.000. Because, you know. Not in that regard. You're the ones who have been fortunate to be part of this conversation. But it's less than 1%, but not that 1%.
But yes, I think we definitely need to get the average persons, even if they're not interested, at least aware and educated on these issues.
Yes, Jhada, I see you're very excited about that point in terms of how do we get the education going?
Yeah, because you mentioned about diversifying the education. A could mean different things, and in the last budget, the Ministry of Education got one of the highest allocations.
That's right, yeah.
About $7 billion and above.
That's right, yeah.
And I feel like education is not just academic. A lot of young people from, a young age, they have different skills, different talents, and I feel like the school curriculum should be diversified to include this, because not everyone's strong point is academics.
That's right.
And a lot of persons struggle after they finish SCA or CXC with finding jobs because everything is so academically based.
And we built a society that says success is measured by how well you do at SCA, or success is measured by how well you do at CSEC, or success is measured by, or which school you went. I see I've touched a nerve here. Everybody's nodding, yes. But I agree that education, and which is why I started with the framing questions. Who are we educating for, and what are we educating for? So a conversation around AI, which I don't want to be too mischievous about that. I mean, I went to a graduation ceremony in a rural area, a rural community. They asked me to be their feature speaker at their graduation for their SCA students. And those of you who know me know I'm kind of far removed from SCAs. So I'm there going to this rural community and trying to figure out, why go and tell these children, boy?
Come on and try.
Yeah, what precisely? What am I going to say to these children? And of course, in framing my feature address, I asked, how many people in the room know about AI? And of course, the only people who put up their hands were the SCA students. And their parents are kind of like, huh? What's that?
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was my wow moment, my epiphany, that our education should not end at the level of how much passes you get, or what degree you get, etc., but it should be ongoing. So a conversation around AI, and I am happy that there is a ministry looking at AI. I've not seen their work program, but hopefully in the budget discussions next week and beyond, we will get greater insight. But I really do think that education, not just the allocation, because again, for those of you who might know me, I have said publicly, not too interested in the allocation. It is the return on the investment that I think should be what we should be looking at. How well or how badly is this 7 billion or 3 billion or 5 billion helping us to achieve our objectives? I want to touch on a thorny subject, which will turn up in the budget, which will receive a lot of attention in the budget. I am choreographing here. It will turn up. Youth involvement in crime.
Ooh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, you want to jump off the chair? Because we're talking about youth, and we're speaking in a very sanitized way about the budget and, thing, and we need to educate. But the reality is that a lot of our peers, youth adjacent am I, and, are the perpetrators of crime. If you had, and I'm going to go to each one of you, because I think it is an important subject. Right. I think it straddles education, it straddles what is happening in our communities, it straddles the economy, it straddles the unemployment, it straddles a host of issues. Oh, I see, I get you excited there, Soleil. How, if you had to have an input into the conversation in national security come next week, because we know that is going to be a significant part of the conversation. Yeah. How would you suggest that be approached? What is your one point? And I'm going to go around the room. What is your one point you would say to either the minister, I'm going to help you along, to either the Minister of Homeland Security, to the Minister of Education, to the Minister of Justice, to the Minister of Finance? Because all of these are cross-cutting, and there is no one place to the Attorney General. Is there something that should be done legislatively? How do we broker these conversations to deal with this burning platform of our youth being so heavily involved in crime?
I guess so.
All right, okay. You want to jump off? Come, let's go.
So I just want to tie back with employment and education and crime rates, right? So I am in my 20s, and I'm now starting my degree.
Youth adjacent, yeah.
Yes. And what happened is you tend to see a lot of maybe Form 5, maybe Form 6 going straight into university because they seem to know what they want to do with their lives. But it takes some people some time to figure out, okay.
And that's good. Nothing's wrong with that. That's perfect. Yeah, that's good.
But there are some persons who might not even finish high school level, or maybe because they finished SCA and they can't afford to go to high school, so they stay at home and they become delinquents. And they're like, okay, well, I can't find a job because I'm underage for the labor force. And they start to do petty crimes here, there, and everywhere. And even as big adults who can't find a job because you may have a bachelor's, a master's, even a PhD, and you can't find employment because they expect a certain amount of experience.
That's right.
But you just came out of school, so how am I supposed to have 5 years experience? So because of all these things, you end up turning to crime because it seems easier to attain certain things because I mean, we don't have the money because we're not working anywhere.
So it's really a multifaceted, which is why I touched on all of those ministries because, you know, some people hear crime and they say, national security, homeland security, but it really is multifaceted.
And to touch on the subject with national security, Mr. Alexander, he actually mentioned trying minors as an adult. Now, as part of the Childhood Justice Collective, I do not stand for it.
We're going to come back to give you that opportunity to ramage on that point in a little while. Kriss, how do we address this multifaceted issue from your perspective? If you had to give some advice to, you know, at this 99th hour, because the budget will probably not be finished until Monday at 1:29 and 57. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing.
On this particular point, yeah.
On this particular point, remember I spoke about education reform, right? Again, that's not a switch, because we already have students within the system. So I think there ought to be a short, medium, long-term plan, at least for this generation that you are treating with, the next generation, and so on and so forth. And I mean, Soleil did mention, you know, the socio-economic aspect of it. The context matters, the type of household you may come from, the income that is generated within the household. I mean, right now we have a number of persons unemployed as a result of an election. So hopefully within the budget that can be course corrected. And that adds to it. I think having no other option adds to it. So we have to create options, right? We have to create options.
Your light bulb moment going on.
We have to create options. So we have to create jobs. And so we need to establish what are the outcomes for these things. Are we just putting figures for figures' sake? We spoke about education in that, what it was, 7-8 billion.
7 billion.
And I agree with you. I don't like to talk about it because most are transfers, subsidies, salaries, and wages. But how much is in research and this, development? I can tell you it's like maybe like us, the 1% or less than the 1%. So I think that it needs to be holistic. We need to establish what are the outcomes we want with the model citizen. And we need to get into the communities. And we have ministers for that. We have a minister of community development. We have a minister of we have 2 ministers of national security. We have the attorney general.
1 minister of homeland security.
We have homeland security. Defense.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, different.
Then we have the Ministry of Sport and Youth. So education, tertiary, I think by now, with all of these people, one of the biggest cabinets, I hope that they have some solutions.
Darion, what do you think? How are we going to address this burning platform, this elephant in the room of the number of youth who are involved in crime? And what would your recommendation be? Because Kriss's recommendation is that we really need to have a what I would call the whole of government kind of approach, because it is not, the solutions don't lie in any one ministry. But so what are your thoughts?
One of my things, as you mentioned, was justice. I definitely think we need to see justice being applied across the board. It shouldn't be what's good for you is not good for me. It should be you do the crime, you do the time at all levels. I want to see people prosecuted for doing wrongdoing, not just one case going on 20 years and then you got away scot-free just because of
some technicality.
Clerical. Yes, and we see too much of that, and I think that's, in a way, it incentivizes crime because it's no longer should I do crime or not. It's what crime can I get away with.
Jhada, okay, Jhada. All right, Jhada. Okay.
Because they have great points. Because the reason why crime is such a sector that is so lucrative is because it's being allowed to be.
You weren't going to use the L word, you know.
No, because it's being allowed for it to be. The saying goes, You know, the block hard, but the road, you know, the block easy, the road hard, but the block easy. It's the same because a lot of young people find that it's easier, quicker, faster.
Because I thought I never.
I heard it.
Yeah.
The road hard, but the block easy.
Exactly, because it's harder for them to get jobs. One, also because of the education system. They feel like if they fail at academics, there is nothing else that is left for them to make money. And drugs is easy, crime is easy. Going and just thief money from someone, snatching someone's jewelry, that's easy. But if we crack down seriously on the crime and nip it in the bud from the start of it, then that will greatly help to reduce that lucrative business of crime.
Incentive.
Exactly,
Incentive
because if you know that you go and you rob somebody and then whoop, police around the corner. You see, a lot of the things too is that we don't really have cameras around. It's very easy for persons to get away with crime. After they commit a crime, you don't know, you're searching for years for the suspect. There is not anybody watching you. We need to have more police or other security systems on the roads, on these hotspot areas. If it is they are there already, then it's going to be even harder for the crime to continue. So I feel like just stopping it at the source, all of us know certain areas that are heavily with crime. Get police, get national security involved. Let's cut it down from the source.
I'm here. I'm coming before I jump off the seat. I'm hearing the conversation and I'm hearing the plea for more resources. And as I said, Universe is saying that is probably going to be part of the conversation on Monday in terms of when the budget is read. But there is a part of me that says the resources are not the issue. The resources, preaching here. The resources are not the issue. It is the efficient use of the resources that really is the issue. Because again, I come back to my point that certainly for the last 5, 6, 7 years, I have publicly stated in post-budget for I really want to know the allocation. My thing is, have we done any sort of monitoring and evaluation, public service language, to see what worked with the last allocation that we had, what didn't work, what gaps there are, how can we improve our processes so that we get closer to the outcomes that we want to get. And I see Nicholai I'm talking Nicholai's language, so yes.
But to just cycle back on your last question, I think outreach is important. Outreach, I say, because...
To the youth at risk.
Yeah, because, I serve in my village council. I'm the president. And our council transitioned from a number of older persons to a young council, and in terms of persons in their 20s, right?
Very nice.
When we took over, you were able on a community level to know, I know this young man, he's having financial difficulties because he can't get a job. I know this person, she comes from a broken home because of whatever's going on. What we do, this exists there, at least in our district, there's what you call the station council between the police, the municipal corporation, the village councils, and you meet on a weekly basis and you have that support. The information needs to be translated. Where from the station council, where does that information go? If you know and you have these institutions in place on this grassroots level, then information can be sent up to say, hey, what we as a country, we wait till things get to national level and we don't nip it in the bud like you rightfully said, because the village council is such a good place to start, because on that level.
The village council knows everything happening on the ground. The village council could tell you who don't have internet in their house, who don't have Wi-Fi, who have water, who don't have water, etc., etc. I'll come to you in a while, Kriss, but I know you wanted to finish the point.
So I'm just saying, outreach at the grassroots level, at the citizen level, before it balloons into this national thing, and then rehabilitation. Yes, we want to see justice served, and we want to see sentences carried out and persons held accountable. But we get the youth into the system after they've served their time. What happens then? So I think there needs to be rehabilitation, whether it be in the that's part of your program, that's part of your sentence, that when you are reintegrated into society, you can become a productive member of society. Because let's be real, when you enter the system, crime is a part of that system, in the prison system. Let's be real about it, right? So I think outreach one and rehabilitation after.
Yeah, because we also have to be mindful of the levels of recidivism. People who are then, you go into the system and you just come back out and You know, it's kind of like a cycle, a revolving door for you. So you came out today, you're going to commit another crime, and by next week you're back inside. Yes, so I know that you've been wanting to talk.
That's exactly the point. Because what happened is, so I actually had a conversation with a socially displaced person. He says that how he prefers to commit the crime because he gets in breakfast, lunch, and dinner on a taxpayer's dollars once he goes in jail. So it's easier to commit the crime because he's still being taken care of. Why is that the only way we have to turn to be taken care of?
Yeah, because I think personally, and I'm not a criminologist, and I'm not in social justice, but I consider myself a citizen who kind of looks at issues from a holistic perspective. So it's not just a very narrow economic perspective. It's every year you're spending $40 billion, $50 billion, and are we asking ourselves whether we're seeing the return on that investment? So national security continues to be a pain point for us. Even when you spoke about tourism in Tobago, last year I was at a post-budget session, and the conversation, one of the slogans that came out of that was, there could be no prosperity without security. So we can't talk about tourism, to my mind, unless we address this issue. Yeah. Sometimes you're driving through Port of Spain and you see tourists coming off of the cruise ships and you see them kind of like Lala, they're in Trinidad, oh my God, particularly at Carnival time, and you're saying, oh my God, I hope nothing happened to them.
Yes.
Because they're just walking with their bag and and the camera and they're taking pictures and you're
just
please, let nothing happen to them.
Yeah.
Kriss, you wanted to make an intervention.
The interjection I wanted to make was, I acknowledge that many NGOs would do their job in terms of outreach. Councillors are a part of a party, even the MP's office. So there are those fora in which you can take your concerns, and I mean, it's no secret here, we know, I mean, don't know if we have the data to suggest it, but we can imagine how many resumes are in a drawer at an MP's office. And just April the 20th would have been elections, so there would have been a period in which you would have consulted through the length and breadth of the constituencies asking for a vote. And so you would have done your canvassing, you would have known the persons who are looking for a new home, you would have done my son unemployed, this one drop out. You would have known these things. And let's also not fool ourselves here. The area in which you can really get certain votes easier, maybe the persons who may be more vulnerable. You make a promise and hopefully you get the vote on the day. So to me, I don't want to believe there's an absence of knowing that these things exist, I think there's an absence of the political will that needs to do the things to create the solutions for these people.
Yeah,
Sure, of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, I think we as a country need to come away from where I offer you a job for a vote. I really don't like it.
Can we get an amen in here?
No, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree fully because that's the reality. But we need to get away from this. Get me into office and I will get you a job. We need to you are in office to govern the entirety of the country, whether the citizens would have voted for or against you. We are all citizens.
But the reality is, and I hear you and I agree with you 100%, but the reality is, Nicholai, that this conversation we're having and the level of exposure and socialization that each of you would have and that you brought to this conversation isn't replicated at the level of your peers.
Yeah.
So for many people, and I like the term you use, the bartering is the only way what you gonna do for me?
Correct.
Yeah.
What you gonna do for me?
One hand
clap. What you gonna do for me?
Yeah.
So whether it's a jersey with a $500 or a jersey with a phone or a promise of a job or whatever it is, for many persons in our society, not only youth, for many persons in our society, barter system is what works. What you gonna do for me?
And I mean, I take your point, and I agree with you, and I think that is how it should be, but that's not how it is.
Yeah.
That is not the reality.
So the point I was going to make, just to complete that thought, how do we cause that cultural shift, that education, and when I use education, I don't only mean it in the formal sense. How do we cause that cultural shift where our citizens understand that the budget is the most important policy document in Trinidad and Tobago. It is enshrined in the Constitution that it has to be treated a particular way. How do we cause that cultural shift where, yes, we acknowledge that there are political parties, and yes, we acknowledge that the government of the day is going to be drawn from a particular political persuasion. Yes, we acknowledge those things because those are part and parcel of our realities.
Yeah.
But how do we cause our population, how do we educate? So older persons might already be stuck in their particular ways. How do we cause there to be that revolution of the mind, revolution of the thinking among your contemporaries? How do we cause that change to happen?
I would say media is a big avenue that we need to take advantage of, because we're already having the conversations about what we're dissatisfied at, what we need to see more of. We need to also have that education. We need to be educated on what we're talking about, because a lot of the conversations taking place right now on X, well, formerly Twitter, and Threads.
I know.
Or what we feel about the budget. A lot of it is what we feel about the budget, but what is it? What ministries need that allocation? What still needs to be done? Where are we losing out that needs to be, at least get to break even?
And I also want to add a little caveat or clarification, not just media as in mainstream media, because I don't know how many of you all went out and bought your newspapers this morning. None. Right, precisely. So it's really social media. So instead of going on social media for the latest bacchanal, let us use our social media platforms purposefully.
Correct.
And in a way, so Soleil made the point about the infographics, about the budget and that. Let us use, is there anybody who's going to be sitting, listening to the budget on October the 13th, who's going to be kind of like spewing out infographics in real time so that somebody could understand, hey, wait, you mean there's an opportunity for me to go and do the how about AI? Is there anybody who's, and we're using this, we're selling ideas here, we'll collect fees on our way out. We're selling ideas here. Is there anybody who's going to be extracting from the budget those things that are relevant to different segments of our population? So our youth, here's what is going to be happening for you, because we don't really want to wait until the Minister of Youth stands to make his contribution in the Parliament. Is there anybody who's going to be pulling out, I know there are pensioners who are going to be waiting to find out if the pension increase, etc., etc. But social media, I think, is a powerful tool that is overused, but overused, I dare say, for the wrong reasons. Bacchanal and confusion. So carnival time, nobody puts out ads anymore, social media, and you get your FET promoted, etc., etc.,
Committees.
Come on, free. Well, not free, but really, at less cost.
Yeah.
Less cost. So, Jhada, what are your thoughts? I see you there nodding and saying yes. Come on.
I agree wholeheartedly with what you were saying. I think that it's time we evolved over just YouTube, because it's transitioned from being shown on TV to now it's on YouTube, and that is not enough for young people to get young people as interested. I love the idea that she said while they are speaking, they have various staff employed, they have different media teams in the Parliament or in the ministries, in the Ministry of Finance, have persons putting out that information in a way that is appealing for the young people to see. When they see youth budget, everything that is highlighted, what is going to come from the allocation, what jobs is going to come, what opportunities are there. And I feel like young people would be more susceptible to the budget in that way, because it is appealing and interesting to them, and they see through the social media how they are generally affected.
All right, okay. I want us to start to go back, and now to move forward. If you can give me, because I imagine you've all done this, you did this last year in some shape or form, one takeaway from Budget 2025, which you think might have worked, was working, because we know that there was a disruption with the change in the government on April the 28th. If there was anything from Budget 2025 that you think should be brought forward, so you spoke earlier on about the homestead programs in agriculture, if there's anything else that you want to see move forward, because at the end of the day, it is about national development and youth national development, the development of youth of the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. So is there anything that you want to take from Budget 2025 that you would like to see in Budget 2026 that you think is important? I mean, we've touched on a number of things, but now let's kind of bring it home and kind of be very sort of succinct and clear in terms of what we would want to see come Monday. So haven't given them this idea of, and hopefully they'll be outside with our checks because we've given them some really
In
very
US.
Definitely.
In US.
Who's the foreign
have
exchange?
no foreign exchange. So we will take it in the TT equivalent, all right? Are there issues that you would like to see highlighted in that high level, not too sure how long Minister Tanku's maiden budget presentation will be, but that you would like to see that person who's working behind the scenes and sending out the social media blast say, hey, youth, this is something for youth in rural Trinidad. This is something for youth in urban Trinidad. This is something for youth who now coming out of, who didn't get a full certificate in CSEC. This is something for the youth who just came out of Cape, who trying to figure out what to do. This is an opportunity. We're establishing a new office. There I go again with those ideas. I wonder if they really have somebody outside waiting to give us some payment. What is your, and I'll start with Kriss, what is it that you want to take into Monday's event, and well, of course, the budget debate that will ensue the weeks after, but certainly Monday, because I'm not too sure how many people focus on the weeks after. People kind of think, well, oh God, they're talking again, yeah. But Monday, what would you like to either take from 2025's budget presentation into 2026, because you think it is useful from a youth development, because we're building a nation, and we recognize that the youth are the future. I think there was a famous calypsonian or someone said, youth is the future. What is it that you'd like to see, notwithstanding the change in the executive? Because we know sometimes when the executive changes, the baby goes out with the bathwater, and we really don't want that to happen. Of course, all you know that saying, right? I didn't know. Right. You want to sound, because I'm youth adjacent, right? Yeah. All right. What is it? And I want to start with Kriss. What is it that you want to see there? Because you think investing in it, not the budgetary allocation, but investing in this thing is actually going to help our youth feel more engaged in this process and engaged as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So
outside of the Homestead project, one of the other things in which I would like to see at least remain in its current format would be GATE. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So for many persons who they see these young persons accessing GATE. It's actually a very detailed process now. You have to go through a means test, and the institution in which you are applying to must be recognized as well. So I do think we can at least keep that. Now I know that this incoming administration would have indicated on various forums that they intend to expand GATE. Now I don't know how big that expansion could be. Maybe it may be at the master's level, maybe. And if it is so, I still think a means test should be utilized, or perhaps maybe a percentage in which it's being subsidized. And the other thing that I want us to not forget is that GATE's intention is really for national development, right? It is not that you could go and study anything and everything.
Which I'm glad you raised that point. And the other four have not been forgotten, hold on to your points. I'm glad you raised that point, because GATE has to redound to the benefit of the country at the end of the day. So while I would really love for you to go and do 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 degrees and have all of the letters of the alphabet behind your name, how does this contribute to the development of Trinidad and Tobago? So I think that has to be part and parcel of the conversation. So perhaps in coming up with whatever the reformatted or continued format of GATE is, we identify priority areas for the government, because as part of the government's medium-term plan, they think that these are the areas that we should go into.
Yeah, and I also, one more thing I want to mention, because I know that the listening public would be getting information from this as well, is that in its current form, GATE, you are allowed to utilize the undergrad aspects. So you can do a certificate, then you can do a bachelor's, but that's it. You can't do 10,000 degrees, because I know there are some persons who believe that in its current form it is like that, but no, it is not.
And I also want to add in here, the economist, and we can't allow this moment to pass. We need to recognize the state of our economy.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be honest, and I got a little, I got a thumbs up from Jhada for that. I think the conversation on Monday has to be, let me look into your eyes, let us move our blinkers away. This is the state of our economy. Not a who done it and who didn't do it, but because we are so heavily dependent on factors, on a sector that is really determined by what happens in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And what happens in the rest of the world sometimes does not really redound to our benefit. So we've seen this rapid decline in the energy sector, both in terms of production at the national level, but also in terms of the prices because of the volatility that's taking place externally, and that has not helped us. So any conversation around whether it's GATE or any other program that the government wishes to advance on Monday, I really am hoping that there is an honest leveling with the population of where we are, not just in terms of revenues and expenditures, but also in terms of things like debt, that dirty four-letter word, you know. Yeah. So thanks for that, Kriss. GATE, okay. Les Soleil, what do you want to either see taken forward or brought in anew?
OJT, keep OJT, but increase it to 3 years because majority of the jobs ask you for 3 years working experience.
Yeah. So coming out of university, you can't ask me for experience. I just come out of university. Exactly. So you would like to see your OJT program expanded to 3 years so that persons coming out with their degrees can be accommodated. Nicholai.
I want to see the Ministry of Trade. Jhada, I want to see the Ministry of Trade.
That's a bilateral joke. That's a Tobago one.
The government is the largest employer. We know this. But there are young people who start their own businesses, companies, SMEs. Let's get programs involved to help these young people, one, with the information being available, and two, with the grants. Sometimes grants are so tedious to access in terms of the process itself and the information that's required. Let's have, if the process is to remain the same, let's have these workshops. But definitely I want to see more grants geared towards young persons fostering that entrepreneurial spirit to have their own businesses. And I want to see corporate Trinidad and Tobago to come on board as well. I know it's in the government setting here, but corporate Trinidad partner with the government because the government cannot do everything on its own, right? But yeah, definitely young persons in business.
And on the point of entrepreneurship, I always like to add my 2 cents. We always talk about entrepreneurship as if, it just falls from heaven like manna, you just become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
When in truth and in fact, our education system really did not encourage you to be entrepreneurial. So that if you stand in class and Miss says A for apple, B for bat, and C for cat, and you say, Miss, A could also be for America, and B could be for Barbados, and C could be for Canada, Miss might tell you that that is wrong.
Correct.
I have known parents who've had to have that challenge with their children in school. So part of the reform has to include how do we foster this entrepreneurial spirit. So we talk about SMEs, and it sounds very lovely, small and medium enterprises and all of these things. But many of the persons who want to venture into that space are at a loss, and we need that kind of one-stop shop to help support them.
I think, just to end my point, is that there is this culture and this mindset that tech work and trade skills are poor people's job, right?
Can I get a...
Right? And you rightfully said, it starts in the education system. We need to break it out. Just because someone is doing woodworking or something, we have to break out of this mindset that these skill jobs or trade jobs are somewhat of a lesser class than holding office and being a lawyer and a doctor.
Ask me how many of you all inside of here can actually change an oil filter in all your car.
Absolutely. I can't.
It's an engineer.
I mean, I can't.
You know where to go to get it changed. You know where to go to get it changed.
But yeah, definitely that shift in mindset to incorporate into the education system. So from young children know, okay, I don't have to be an engineer, mommy. I don't have to be a doctor, daddy.
Could be a car engineer.
Oh yeah. But if I want to go into woodworking, if I want to go into these skills, that it's okay.
And there's a very cogent point that I want to make on that. When the United Kingdom was part of the EU before Brexit, that allowed for free movement of technical skills into the United Kingdom. So, persons, if you want your fridge, if you want your kitchen remodeled, the person who was doing that, the woodworking, everything might come from Poland or something else. Of course, when Britain exited the European Union, it means these people now have to get permits to come into England. And when England was part of the EU, they swung their focus away from tech folk into more so-called mainstream industries, and now they have to kind of review their educational curriculum so that you cater for everyone, because not everyone is either interested in or keen on your whole CSEC and kind of normal, traditional educational thing. Your takeaway, Jhada?
Yeah, I want to piggyback off what Nicholai said in terms of trade. I like that the previous administrations and current governments before the previous administration, they focus on sectors outside of education, such as the trade. They focus on things like youth programs, the CCC, the YTEP, the MIC, things that young people know that there are options available where they could be trained by professionals, where they could get the knowledge to become the professionals and to affect our economy by other means besides education or going and study and come and work in an office. There are other sectors, as he said, the trade, the agriculture and stuff like that, where young people, that was a focus, and I hope that coming out of that budget into the new one, young people are also focused in that area as well.
All right, well said. And pulling up the rear.
As a technologist, I will definitely go back to digitization and AI. I think that we are definitely behind in a lot of areas in the country, in the sense that there's a lot of friction in terms of always having to go to the office, calling a phone and no one's answering it, calling a phone that doesn't ring.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that rings constantly, no one answers.
Yeah.
But can I just ask you to specify when you say digitization? Don't ask me to fill out the form online and then print it and bring it into the office, please.
Correct.
So could you specify that is not what you mean?
That's exactly.
Fill it out online, then print it and bring it to the nearest office. That is not what you mean.
That's not what
I would like to be able to stay in my house and start and execute a transaction. That's what you mean by digitization.
Correct. Exactly what we had to do during the pandemic for driver's
Absolutely. And
Taxes.
Correct.
yeah, you sit at home, you have to print it out and take it to the nearest office. So, as we are starting to wind down our session, I thank you so much for the cross-fertilization and the really exciting ideas and conversation we had. But of course, I can't just let it do just so. Two things I want to touch on. One, and this will probably be the roundup session for each of you. So I'm going to start with Nicholai and then come all the way around, so we'll end up with Jhada. Two things. One, and I'm being very provocative here, but I know it has interest, but it also is tangential to the issue we spoke about earlier about youth and crime. One, the government in their manifestos, one of the areas of diversification they spoke of was C for cannabis.
Cannabis, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? But also, two, surprise, I haven't heard much about green, orange, blue economies in terms of. So in the remaining time, I'm going to give everyone a minute and a half just to kind of give your thoughts on C for cannabis and the green, blue, orange economies, which I really thought people would jump out with the creatives thing. All right, so if we can just do a quick kind of, pack it in there, compile it, yes.
Definitely more, we've always had this taboo nature in which we approach the subject of cannabis and medical marijuana and all of these things. Definitely, I think it is something that we need to open the mindset to educating the public on it. I am for it. I mean, we know that there are some uses for it on the medical scene. Of course, I'm not qualified to speak on the medical scene. But right?
You're not qualified.
But I definitely think that you have a lot of persons in jail and have charges because they would have been smoking a joint, X amount of grams, whatever. All of that plays into the rehabilitation and nipping in the bud, so definitely agree with that. Blue, orange, green economy, yes, oh my goodness. The blue economy, I recently attended a conference and we were talking about blue economy, fishing and all of these, the main, right. But the other economies, we spend too little time focusing on these things, and we focus heavily on the oil and gas and all of these things, and we do it as a by the way. When you're invited to a conference, we attend and we say all the nice pretty words, but then the effort isn't there. So I hope that moving forward, the government of the day, you take the adequate time to go into the blue, green, and the orange economy and put your money where your mouth is.
New pathways for our youth. Yes, Soleil.
We should introduce these economies in the education system as young as
outset, back to educational
high
reform.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I didn't know about all those colorful economies.
There's gray too. There's gray economy. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's only when you get involved in the youth space and persons who are advocating for it, you find out, oh, there's X, Y, Z. But they should teach it in schools.
All right.
And
Absolutely.
in terms of the cannabis, so I'm not for it, but I understand why people do it. I mean, they should education again. You should teach about it.
There might be a relationship between that and youth involvement in crime. So it's really an opportunity to look again holistically at it. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Yeah.
So actually, my first parliamentary session as a youth parliamentarian would have been to debate the decriminalization of marijuana. So way back in 2018, this would have been a topic in which we would have been discussing among young people. I want to see the parliament at least discuss that. I look forward to your contribution on that as well. And in terms of the orange economy,
we need to wrap up.
we need to establish what brand Trinidad and Tobago is and what that product is and sell it on the wider
Absolutely.
market.
I think we need to be clear on who we are and what it is we want. And it's not just about carnival people, please. Yes. Yes, Darion.
I want to see less taboo around the topics as demonization. Let's have an educated discussion on it.
Absolutely.
A country in a deficit shouldn't be burning millions of dollars in cannabis, because that's...
No pun intended, yeah. Burning up the money. Jhada.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the blue economy in terms of Tobago's
Absolutely,
aspect.
yes.
We are an island, and Tobago boasts of beauty our coastlines and our marina. And I think that if we can get the investment in a marina in Tobago, that is going to boost our economy. It's going to boost our foreign exchange, especially because of Tobago's location underneath the hurricane belt.
Yeah.
We can see a great boost in our economy from the yachting industries. A lot of persons from these small islands, they have boats, they have big yachts. Why can't we have somewhere to house these things and earn money? That also creates jobs for the young people.
I was just about to ask you if it's something that the young people...
Yeah, of course, it creates jobs. Who wouldn't want to work on a yacht and work in that?
I just had this last point. Speaking on the
Just now, I just wanted to make sure that you finished.
Yeah.
We have some of the best persons who deal with the marina, right in Chaguaramas.
That's correct,
Persons
yes.
come all
Skills,
the
that's
way,
right. Come down.
right to
In
Chaguaramas.
fact, when there was Hurricane, what's her name last year? I forget, that came in July. There was, you can actually see it, all the traffic coming down to Trinidad and Tobago to dock. To dock in Trinidad and Tobago because of the opportunities.
I definitely agree. We have some of the best in the world,
Yes,
and we
world
take it
class.
for granted.
And some of them trained at UTT as well.
Yeah.
So I would like to just kind of close off by thanking, I don't know where to start. It was just such a rich conversation. Thanking Nicholai, thanking Soleil, thanking Kriss, thanking Darion, thanking Jhada, our sister from Tobago, for being with us today. The conversation, I think, was rich. It just flowed, and it certainly gave me reason to pause, because our young people have a lot of ideas. They are keen to develop Trinidad and Tobago because this is their country. And I think we need to look forward for opportunities. So the orange, the blue, the green, the gray economies, all of these things. But one of the things that I think we agreed on is the need for us to have a whole of government approach where we can identify issues that are cross-cutting, that impact on our youth, and provide a space, one dedicated space where our youth can learn, they can be socialized, they can understand the opportunities available to them, they can vent their challenges, and collectively, we as a country can move forward in furtherance of the development of our beloved Trinidad and Tobago. So I again want to thank each of you for being here this morning on behalf of the Parliament. I want to thank our hosts for inviting us to be here. Hopefully they would have been pleased with the job, but we were pleased with the job. So let's give ourselves a round of applause. I think we were pleased with the job that we did this morning. So again, I want to thank those who are viewing. Thank you for watching us. This was the Youth Budget Talks, looking at what happened in fiscal 2025 and advancing some ideas moving forward to fiscal 2026. Don't forget, budget date is October the 13th, starting at 1:30 p.m. here at the Parliament. So good day to everyone and be safe out there.